India-China tensions are escalating with the news of a possible Chinese airbase in Bangladesh threatening the Siliguri Corridor. So should India now hit back by joining the United States of America in questioning China's occupation of Tibet? The Donald Trump-led administration, in a bold move, has slapped visa restrictions on Chinese officials involved in policies limiting access to Tibetan areas. Meanwhile, several Indian leaders have backed Dalai Lama's right to choose the next Tibetan spiritual leader, something which the CCP absolutely rejects. Now, we'll tell you all about that, but first, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the move questioning the CCP crackdown on Tibet. He stated, quote, "Today I am taking steps to impose additional visa restrictions on Chinese officials determined to be substantially involved in the formation or execution of policies related to access for foreigners to Tibetan areas," unquote. Now, these visa restrictions on Chinese officials come under the direct implementation of the 2018 Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act. But China doesn't want anyone to access Tibet, as the CCP has been accused of eliminating the Tibetan culture. The ancient country has been under Chinese military control ever since the invasion in the 1950s, and the global superpowers are guilty of turning their backs for the price of cheap Chinese goods. Despite the region's significance for its unique culture and history and resources, Chinese authorities continue to guard Tibet like an open prison. No one is allowed access inside, not even Tibetans who oppose the CCP occupation. US says that this Chinese ban would not be tolerated anymore. This move has been hailed by the International Campaign for Tibet, who stated, quote, "We commend the Trump administration for asserting that China's failure to adhere to the principles of reciprocity is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. This law was designed to challenge China's restrictions on access to Tibet, and we hope the United States will continue to make effective use of it until China stops trying to isolate the land of snows," unquote. The move comes even as the US-China trade war is intensifying, and the world has to choose now between the West or communist China. The CCP has long been accused of suppressing any form of opposition. Apart from isolating Tibet, the United Nations believes up to 1 million Uyghur have been locked away in secret camps. In fact, this UN report claims, quote, "Allegations of patterns of torture, ill treatment, including forced medical treatment and adverse conditions of detention, are credible, as are allegations of individual incidents of sexual and gender-based violence," unquote. But countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh, during their numerous visits to China, just don't have the brawn to raise the issue of Uyghurs with CCP. Now, this same playbook might be repeating inside Tibet, but the world just isn't aware of it because of the Chinese Iron Curtain. So now the United States has decided to hold China accountable by imposing these visa restrictions, but what impact they might have, if any, remains to be seen. Of course, the US move has drawn harsh criticism from Chinese leaders. CCP claims that this is gross interference in China's internal affairs and a serious violation of international law. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said, quote, "We oppose the groundless slander of the status quo of human rights, religion and cultural development in Xizang, Tibet, and oppose the interference and sabotage practices of foreign officials in the name of performing their duties in the region," unquote. The US State Department has repeatedly urged Chinese authorities to respect religious freedom and allow Tibetans to preserve and practice their culture without government interference. India similarly has always stood in solidarity with the Tibetan people who faced the brunt of the Chinese military invasion in the 1950s. Hundreds of thousands of Tibetans who did not want to live under Chinese occupation fled to India, including the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. On March 31st this year, Tibetan right activists involved in the Tibet Advocacy Alliance India campaign claimed that 46 Indian MPs have backed Dalai Lama's right to determine his successor. without any interference from China. A joint declaration signed by members of various political parties was made public, emphasizing the selection of the next Dalai Lama while adhering to Tibetan religious principles. In March 2025, the Dalai Lama had stated, quote, "Since the purpose of the reincarnation is to carry on the work of the predecessor, the new Dalai Lama will be born in the free world so that the traditional mission of the Dalai Lama will continue," unquote. But why is this important? It's because the Chinese Communist Party believes or claims only Beijing can decide who will be the next Dalai Lama. In other words, a political party wants to control the destiny of Tibetans worldwide. The International Tibet Network highlighted the freedom rights mentioned in Article 18 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, claiming they are being infringed by CCP's attempts to control the reincarnation process. Moreover, China keeps playing the Tibet card to provoke India. China claims internationally recognized Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh its own territory as South Tibet and keeps renaming places there to absolutely no effect at all. But last year, finally, India retaliated. New Delhi took its boldest step and, in a sense, reopened the Tibet occupation debate. India restored ancient names of 30 places in Tibet, which existed since before the Chinese occupation. Now, these have been reclaimed from historical records of Tibet in ancient Indian languages, highlighting the bond between Bharat and the ancient country of Tibet. A group of US lawmakers from the previous US administration also visited India in June last year to meet the Tibetan spiritual leader Dalai Lama in Himachal Pradesh in another major push by the US for the Tibetan cause. The bipartisan delegation of 7 lawmakers included House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. They visited the Himalayan town of Dharamsala, the abode of the 88-year-old Tibetan monk in exile. A key focus of their visit was to underscore the Resolve Tibet Act, which was passed by the US administration only weeks prior to their visit, aiming to find peace and reach a middle ground between Tibetan independence advocates and the CCP regime. The visit also raised the heat India and China, who continue to navigate their own tense relations, particularly after the 2016 Doklam standoff and then the 2020 Galwan Valley clashes, given China's constant attempts at salami slicing. Tensions eased after the Modi-Xi meeting at the BRICS summit in Russia. On one hand, the Chinese President Xi Jinping calls for a dragon-elephant tango. On the other, CCP violates India's sovereignty with the CPEC through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is legal Indian territory, as Kashmir's ruler, Maharaja Hari Singh, legally acceded to India in 1947. China also continues to sell weapons worth billions of dollars to Pakistan to directly undermine India's national security. So would it be right for India to join the United States now in supporting the Tibetan cause? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button and subscribe to Inconnect News.